soft rhythmic slapping of rubber on brick. Someone was practicing tennis, or a child was playing ball. I thought it bitterly ironic that not 5 feet away someone was enjoying his life, while I was so close to forfeiting my own. I was beyond the stage of anger, however, and merely prodded my suitcase forward another few inches with the toe of my boot. As I reached the steps of the building, I noticed a dustbin off to the side. I felt it was an omen and tossed the suitcase into it. What need had I now for a few threadbare collars and some mouldy books of poetry? Finally, I squeezed my thin frame through the door, into a kind of waiting room. Inside, the applicants were seated in a row, across from a bored-looking fellow behind a desk, his face buried in the Police Gazette. He took my name and asked me to be seated, as if the request were a complaint. I had never been in the offices of a prominent inquiry agent before, but the room looked much like several antechambers of bureaucrats and barristers that I had visited in the area during my long search for work. When I entered, I felt a tension in the room beyond the mere suspense of waiting for an interview.
"This is a rum one, no mistake,"
an older applicant said to me in a low voice as soon as I sat down in a newly vacated chair.
"Rum?"
I asked. "How so?"
"His nibs here announces each candidate who goes in through that yellow door there. Then they come out madder than a wet hornet. Some come out right away, some in 5 minutes, some 10, but each one acts like he's been horsewhipped. This fellow must be a regular tartar. It's no wonder he can't find someone to fill the post. If you can't stomach the interview, however will you get on with the situation itself?"
It was just as my neighbour had foretold. Each applicant went through the yellow door behind the desk with the fatalism of French noblemen going to the guillotine. Some were ejected immediately, indignant at being dismissed with a cursory glance. Others returned after a few minutes with a scowl on their faces, and after a longer wait, one fellow stormed through the office amid a volley of curses and slammed the outer door, making us all jump. When it was my neighbour's turn, he tipped me a sly wink and sauntered in. After a few minutes he returned, favoured us all with a bow, placed his silk hat atop his head, and walked out with a droll smile on his face. "Llewelyn," the bored man behind the desk announced, consulting his list. It was my turn in the lion's den. I wiped my hands on my trousers, swallowed, and walked through the door. The chamber I entered was well furnished and dominated by a large desk and chair. Bookshelves lined most of the walls, but the heavy tomes shared the space with vases, statues, and objets d'art, most of them oriental in style. As I came in, the tall chair swiveled around to face me, and its occupant stood and pointed to a place on the Persian carpet in front of the desk. I moved to the spot and stood. My prospective employer came from behind the desk, without bothering to offer his hand, and began to walk in a slow, clockwise circle around me, as one does when considering a horse. The light streaming in from the bow window behind me served to illuminate any patches, repairs, or weaknesses in my apparel and boots. He came about in front of me, having completed his circuit, and I was prepared for my immediate dismissal. Instead, still silent, he began a second revolution, counterclockwise this time. I had a different sensation now, as if we were 2 boxers in a prize ring. I would not have been surprised if he had shied a blow at my head.
"You're a black little fellow,"
he said at last, in a deep, raspy voice.
"Well, shall take it."
It was true, but I took offence anyway. I am not tall. The fellow was a head taller than I, and I do have the black hair and swarthy skin of my once great race, the true Celts of Britain, but I didn't care for the way he phrased it. I could see only too easily what had put so many of my competitors in a lather. I was desperate, however, and inured to hardship, and so I merely nodded. He held out a hand, palm upward, and I gave him my entire